Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious today. For over 20 years, the American Space Museum and our nonprofit U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation have been preserving the birth of America's space age right here in its delivery room, Brevard County. We're so proud of our artifacts in our museum, and just 3 blocks from where I'm sitting is Spaceview Park, where over 30 astronaut handprints are in bronze. The only place in the world you can pay homage to all of our American astronauts from Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, including Walt Cunningham, who passed away this week at age 90. Walt's hands are out there at Spaceview Park, and we'll show them off to you tomorrow on Stay Curious. But today we're going to talk about 51 years ago today, President Richard Nixon had a big press conference and announced to the world that NASA would manage a $5.5 billion program to develop a space shuttle that would be the workhorse for future U.S. space efforts and, quote, replace all present launch vehicles, unquote. Quite a bold statement 51 years ago. Of course, the 30-year legacy of the flying orbiters, all 5 of America's $2 billion orbiters, were flown in a 30-year period. The last one 11 years ago. And we're going to talk about some of the concepts that Richard Nixon himself was looking at on drawing boards and so forth. How did they want to approach this? And finally, the money was approved by Congress in April of 1972, $5.5 billion. Today, that's probably more in the vicinity of the $20 billion mark. These orbiters were pitched to be flown almost twice a week. Over 48 to 50 shuttles were to be planned to be flown a year or more. And why? Because it would allow cheap access to space for not just satellites, but also human beings, including civilians, access to space. And as we all know about the shuttle, how it unfolded, and it's still a great story of how the concepts were looked at. Many of them, like this beautiful concept behind me on our green screen, entailed 2 vehicles. One that would be the main vehicle to get it up to that 20-mile barrier and then return and be reused by crewed astronauts, and then the main vehicle go to orbit the Earth and do all the great things. So got in the studio today, Connie McDaniel helping us on our Streamlabs. Thank you, Connie. Marty's over her shoulder there, making her nervous as can be. But we're glad to have Connie learning this. She did a great job yesterday. Marty, thank you for all you've done. Marty and I, for 725 episodes, have been bringing you Stay Curious since March of 2020. And it's our privilege and pleasure to have this outreach for our American Space Museum. Well, let's look at some of the early concepts there, and then we'll kind of look back at how the shuttle era will be judged maybe 50 years ago. But first, it's so hard to think a half a century ago, when you're of the age like me that you can remember a half a century ago and some of these things going on. But still, it is an awesome chapter of American history, the greatest space program ever on the face of the Earth. The 30 years that the shuttle not only expanded our horizons in our solar system and universe with the great spacecraft, interplanetary spacecraft and telescopes it put up, but 22 years continuously, space has been occupied by human beings thanks to the space station that the shuttle built in its last 10 years of its legacy. How did it all start? And what were we all thinking about back in the day? Well, it all really started in World War II, where the V-2 rockets are well documented and how accurate they were, but not many people know about the German named Sanger, and this is his Silverbird, a cutaway of it, where he would have a pressurized cabin that soldiers could be in, and this was a a suborbital space plane that the German Sanger had proposed, and it would be launched on a rail system. All right, so you build like a railroad tracks for it to go off into space suborbital. The Sanger Silverbird's what it was called, and it never really made it to fruition. Another concept that never made it, except in years later, with some of the technology being borrowed, the A9. The A9 was going to be a manned suborbital spacecraft that Germany was hoping to develop to take pilots and then maybe larger crews across the continents as an offensive strike in there. This was another development that never panned out, but nonetheless, another interesting chapter in the 1940s of where the space shuttle technology was going. Then, when NASA was created and we started launching rockets at Cape Canaveral, most of them were ballistic missiles aimed to have nuclear warheads on it. NASA started thinking about, well, one, these warheads, when they go up in the atmosphere, when they come down, have to have heat-resistant metals on them, or the reentry would blow them apart. So on top here is one of the spacecraft. Marty's going to point it out to us there. A really tiny, first show us the men on the bottom. This is a Thor rocket. There, thank you. There's the guys on the bottom. And at the top is the tiny ASSET, ASSETT, stood as an acronym for the Space Shield Engineering System it was trying to design. You can see one up close at the Sands Space Museum outside the gate of our Space Force on Cape Canaveral. It's very small, and but very important technology of the time for reentry materials was the ASSET program. From that, we were going to have an Air Force single man, or maybe two, space vehicle called Dinosaur. All right, like the play on the words of DYNA and then soar, like you soar in space, SOAR. And it bought into the dinosaur crave of the 1960s, where we were just beginning to understand what these giant creatures were actually on the face of the Earth 65 million years ago. But this was a lot of money put into this program of Dinosaur, and then it was decided not to do it. It was going to be launched on a Titan rocket that the Gemini spacecraft was launched on. Imagine this instead of the Gemini spacecraft with two men in it. And it was going to be a reusable space plane that could land on wheels or skids and then be reused over and over again. In fact, a whole fleet of Air Force Dinosaurs was considered to be built and to protect America, give us quick access to space and other countries. And of course, they were going to figure out how to put weaponry on board, if not machine guns, then bombs. So a great chapter of America's history is the Dinosaur program. Marty and I have done programs on it before, and we'll do one again on just the Dinosaur. Quite fascinating program. Imagine a Titan rocket launching that thing. Look at the fins on the bottom of that Titan rocket for stabilization. So very interesting concept. Marty, we got a comment or a question on our UCAC microphone there?
No, just my comment. That would have made Von Braun happy with those big fins.
Oh, yeah, the big fins would have made Von Braun happy because we were told that the Saturn V rocket has fins on it that have no use because Von Braun says a rocket must have fins. And you're psychic, Marty, because here is the great Dr. Von Braun with his concept of a reusable space plane. This was called the Von Braun taxi rocket. And there he had a base rocket there with fins that had maybe 30 engines on it, getting it up to that 20-mile layer where most first stages go. And then he's got the rocket plane on top that could be reusable. I think those wings are greatly exaggerated, but there is Von Braun with his proposed rocket plane. Then this was an entire program on the wide world of Walt Disney in the 1960s. All right, precursor of what was to come. What was to come was after the Gemini and Apollo programs were designed to teach us how to go to the moon. We made it to the moon, and of course 6 flights to the landings, successful landings on the moon. The Apollo program was canceled. That was left us with some hardware left over, so they had 3 Skylab missions in 1974, our first space station, which was just a cylinder of the Saturn S1B rocket built with accommodations to house humans. And then we had 1 flight where we shook hands with the Russians in 1975 in July. And then we had no space planes left. No Apollo capsules were left. We didn't have anything left to go to space. No rockets were left to go to space. We were done in 1975. So with that, but what was on the drawing board was the Space Shuttle, and not sure exactly how it got incubated in the Nixon administration, but it did. And he obviously didn't have anything to do with the Apollo program, yet his signatures are on all 6 plates that are left on the moon. But this was going to be part of his legacy, was creating a space plane that was going to be a space truck and lower the price of access to low Earth orbit to around $200 a pound in 1972 money. That's about $1,000 a pound today. Well, in its entire history, 30-year history, that price never got below $10,000 a pound. Okay, it become a very complex machine, yet a worthy machine in the end, and a fabulous machine. The hiccups along the way, including losing 14 astronauts in 2 accidents, were basically made this. And as history looks back, the shuttle is basically a test vehicle, all 135 launches. Well, let's look at the history of this 51 years ago today. That is Mr. James Fletcher, the 4th NASA administrator, of course, with Richard Nixon at a press conference 51 years ago today, January 5th, 1972. If you were curious, Fletcher was a former president of the University of Utah, and he died in from 71, about 8 years. He died in 1991 at age 72, Fletcher did. Richard Nixon, he actually denied the funds for the post-Apollo program and set his budget limitations because he wanted this shuttle designed. And here's an early concept of it. We've seen the picture with the photographers all around this, and this one of the first models of the shuttle concept. It having an orbiter, a big fuel tank, and 2 solid rocket boosters on either side to help it get up to that 20-mile threshold. Here is Nixon on the Florida soil, there with the Governor Kirk. There is the gentleman in the middle. Not too sure who the other gentlemen are. The one closest to Nixon, I don't think that's Rocco Petrone. Kind of looks like him, but I forget the other dignitaries in there. But there they are having a big time holding another concept of the shuttle that did not have the solid rocket boosters on the side. This is a shuttle we're going to see in a minute. There again, the crude photo op. I've been privileged to do many of these things as an Associated Press photographer. You're saying, go ahead, James, touch it there for us there. Hey, Mr. President, hold it up there for us so we can see it. And everybody's snapping pictures away back in the old film days in 1972. So from 1972 of it being announced to 1976, date of this is September 17th. That is most of the cast of the Star Trek fantasy space series with Gene Roddenberry, there in the beige or brown leisure suit. Look at them leisure suits there, Marty. I haven't seen anybody rocking one of them in a while there. There's Bones wearing a leisure suit talking to Fletcher. This was the reveal of Enterprise. This was the shuttle that did not go to space, but importantly did the tests of the approach and landing tests of the shuttle, that we could land it like a glider. And our good friend of our museum, tell me, Apollo 13 astronaut Hayes. Yeah, Fred Hayes. Yes, Fred Hayes flew this. Okay. Was one of the first ones to fly that. 2 teams of astronauts did. Great story on that. But hey, all you Trekkies out there, we ain't forgot about that. You got a little bit of this in there. There's Nimoy. The only one that she didn't show up for this was Kurt. What's his face? Said he was too busy. Huh?
Bill Shatner.
Yeah, William Shatner did not show up for this. Frankly, I think he thought it was beneath him at the time. But some Trekkie will straighten me out on that, Marty. So let's look at some of the concepts from some of the world's great artists here of what they were trying to interpret that was on the drawing board that engineers were thinking about. Again, 2 space planes were really the concept that everybody wanted to go with, having kind of like a jet liner that would be insulated a little bit for heat protection, because it's not going to go completely out of the Earth's atmosphere, but about 20 or so miles up, with the space plane on top of it. And here's the picture we have behind us on the green screen. I apologize, I didn't write down the artists and contractors and so forth, but boy, I love this because this is like the Super Guppy airplane that brought back some of the big pieces of the spacecraft and rockets to the Space Coast from its contractors. And see the windows up there, for the pilot and co-pilot to look out. And then you got the space plane on top. All right. And you're always wondering, boy, that looks kind of heavy if that would ever work out. And we'll show you a picture where it did work out. Again, 3 more concepts there where you've got a passenger rocket that takes you up the space plane to another, up to space. The orbiter has rockets on the side of it. Now, this was a concept even in the shuttle era, that we could put rockets on the side of it and maybe go to the moon with it, all right? Or orbit the moon, certainly not land on it, or go up higher, maybe 1,000 miles orbit type of thing, or get up there in that 22,000 miles geosynchronous orbit. You note the rockets on the side of that orbiter. And to show you, yep, we actually did a concept like that. This is the approach and landing test with a modified 747 and the 10-ton space shuttle on top of it. Just an amazing engineering feat. Marty, I'm still jealous that you and thousands of space workers got to watch that fly in the skies on the coast here. It had to be something, wasn't it, Marty? He's nodding, yes, it was. So, well, back to our concepts, and you go, what in the world is this? Yeah, they actually thought about putting the shuttle with the ET tank on a Saturn S1B, first stage, all right, with those powerful F1 engines. Not sure that would have worked out too good, but you know what? Guess who had this thought in mind before the shuttle was built and bid on the shuttle? That was Grumman. And there is Emily Carney. Hi, Emily. She's the Space Hipsters #1 and a great friend of our museum. Emily was in our museum a couple years ago, and this actual Saturn S1B with the Grumman concept of a space shuttle on it was in one of our auctions and sold for over $2,000, okay? Scotty McLeod, who passed away, this was part of his souvenirs that he had from being the Grumman's training astronaut for the Apollo era guys on there. So good to see you, Emily. A good excuse for me to promote Space Hipsters. If you're not a Space Hipsters, go to Space Hipsters on Facebook after you like us on American Space Museum and join the 25,000 or so that are following a good threads every day about space history. So, Emily, I know you love that picture with the rare model there. And there is that Grumman type launching off the pad and some concept there. Man, that'd have been something to see, wouldn't it? I wonder if the wings, how they would get those wings to clear the tower, though, Marty. All right, so we had some other concepts that we were working on, and this one is again the Sanger type of concept that America was considering, having engines in the back, and you either have cargo or you have all kinds of seats in there to take people to the moon or space station there. There, Marty, we were looking at this little anomaly there yesterday where my arm comes out of there on there. So just boy, if I got long arms, folks, I'll tell you that, okay? At any rate, they say quit playing around with the toys here and tell your story. Look at this space tug. This looks like something out of Spaceballs, the parody of Star Wars in there. But, it doesn't have to be pretty when it's in orbit. And there is the concept of our space shuttle releasing satellites into space, because one of its great accomplishments of its 30-year legacy of not only the reusability of the orbiters was the repair of satellites after we retrieved them. And we did that many, many times in the first 25 space shuttle missions. And then after Challenger, we got out of that business. Look at that little behemoth there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, about 14, 15, 16 engines on that thing. All right, they don't have a person there for scale. But wouldn't you like to see 2 or 3 of these around our VAB waiting for their turn to fly in space? That was the concept. If this was going to lift off like an airplane on a runway, that's what all those engines were for. And there you have the basic ideas. Max Faget, Faget, the designer of the Mercury capsule and the Gemini capsule, and had something to do with the Apollo capsule. Well, those were just all cans with heat shields on the bottom of them. What's the design there? A lot more than you would really imagine, okay? And Sanger famously designed the concept of this space plane, and it's a beautiful story when you go to Kennedy Visitors Complex and see that story told to you by a short video at the Atlantis building before you see the mighty, beautiful Space Shuttle OV-104 Atlantis in its resting place, so to speak. But crew transportation, delivery of propellant modules to fuel satellites, something that we've never really done a lot of, satellite repair, space station logistics, and deployment of a tug to move things around. These were all some of the jobs that this shuttle they wanted it to do in the early 1970s when these designs were coming up. And keep in mind, I have seen the manifest little booklets, and Marty has too when he started working there, where they're predicting 2 or 3 shuttles every month, about a 2-week turnaround. And I don't think it ever got down to 3 months was about one of the quickest turnarounds. And we'll confirm that with Terry White, our shuttle garage manager, when we have him on during the month of January. How'd you like to fly this? Talk about a flying brick, okay? Holy cow. But this was a Rockwell concept, okay? And that's the Constellation, or the Constitution, I think is what they were calling this at the time. What an odd-looking spacecraft. Not sure how many people that was going to hold. You do have cargo bays there in the middle. Here's another good look. This has kind of got the flair of an X-15 on steroids, doesn't it, Marty? But again, this is the basic concept that NASA adopted, was 3 engines instead of 4 on the SSME, Space Shuttle main engines. Of course, the payload bay, we've said many times, 60 feet long, 15 feet wide, was dictated by the military and how big their spy satellites were going to be, particularly that Big Bird satellite that was quite instrumental in humbling Russia in the 1990s. Mr. Nixon, very famous pose of Nixon, Marty, don't you think? There, his arms folded, acting like he's so, I'll bet he's thinking about eating some bacon there instead of paying attention to what's going on there. What do you think, Connie? Connie's not going to comment on that. Marty might. Marty might.
I probably shouldn't say what I'm thinking he's thinking about.
Go ahead, Marty.
No.
Oh, come on. We're all good here. About Nixon, what he's thinking about? Go ahead.
Mark, it's R-rated, so I can't.
Okay, R-rated. You'll tell me afterwards,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you Usiak brothers later. Who's watching our program today, folks? We got anybody of repute out there watching it? And if you missed yesterday's show, I please beg of you to go back and see our tribute to Walt Cunningham, because I certainly enjoyed featuring the artwork of the late Paul Calley that his son Chris shared with us. And Mark Usiak had some original photographs there. But Robert Law, hope you're doing well up there in Dundee, Scotland, and you're getting through winter okay up there, buddy. There's our friend William Whiting. Good to see you, William. He's looking forward to coming down here in a month or so, Marty. Doug Forrest, thank you for watching us every day on his lunch break in Los Angeles. Cliff Watson sent us 200 stars. That's $2. Who's going to match that today? My buddy down there in Pomona, Australia. He's already into Friday. Did I get paid? Did I get paid, Cliff, if you're in Friday? Okay. And Ophelia Sauterelle, you're watching, young lady, in Paris, or near Paris, or Normandy, France, I think. Cynthia Rossi, thank you. Come by the museum someday, and we'll put you on Stay Curious. Lisa Marie's watching. And, of course, we got Tom Usiak and Tom Celentano watching, as usual, on Stay Curious. Hope they're enjoying looking at a flashback here of the shuttle. There was the dimensions, and as I consult my scroll here, what dimension they have on the shuttle's length of the shuttle? 125 feet. It actually ended up being 122 feet long, 58 feet high to the tail from the ground. The wings are 78 feet apart, too. Wingspan there is 60, what's that say, 84 or 64? 64? Then the back there.
It's like 84.
84. The wingspan ended up being 78. And the cabin was 23 feet up from the ground on there. So not too, the whole shuttle stack was only 184 feet tall. That is dwarfed by the Falcon 9 rocket at 222 feet. So now we're refining here what the shuttle was going to look like on this engineering drawing. You see they got the points everywhere to go through the atmosphere that we never used those. And the mission profile was this: launch, 2 solid rocket boosters. They had considered having them to be liquid fueled, but the pop bottle rocket became better because they weren't going to turn them off anyway, probably, and they couldn't once they went to solid fuel. Those were recovered, and the only thing that was ditched in the ocean, the Indian Ocean, in fact, was the fuel tank. And then, of course, it'd do its job and could be recovered and land on land. That was a biggie, though, landing on land, because America had landed all of its previous crewed space flights in the water. And so this, eliminated that logistics of wetness and getting seasick and risking losing your capsule, like almost happened with Gus Grissom. So, and here is what it looks like, but this is what's called the Shuttle C for cargo. Why didn't we ever build this, Marty? They never did. This was considered to send the Hubble telescope up like this and other satellites in a reusable. This would have been disposable, it looks like. I don't know if that would have been but it was going to be a cargo shuttle up at the top. You could dispose of it or have wings. Again, interesting concept to use that big those SRBs, and that the fuel tank is still needed to do the shuttle engines there. So it was going to be reusable. And then we go back to looking at the space plane, another kind of A1 looking space plane that was basically a V2 on steroids, and a beautiful Robert McCall. I think this was a Life magazine or Look magazine of what the concept was going to be with the vehicle assembly building in the back there. And why not have two space planes and one can be reusable over and over and over again. But that was ditched for what we came up with. And of course, the concept was always to build a space station, have easy access to it. Not quite this kind of access where you're getting back and forth from the shuttle to the space station with a zip line. I'm not sure that was a concept at the time. And look up there, that's NASA in the upper left. You see those numbers? That's an official NASA lithograph concept thought of back in the day. Well, how did it all turn out? You know how it all turned out, just as Tom Usiak's showing us in this beautiful photograph of his. That's STS32, one of the shuttles this month. STS32's payload. Look at that beautiful orbiter. None of the pointiness on it like they thought they would have to have. STS32, as I control my shuttle scroll instead of doing my notes beforehand. That's the LDEF retrieval, long duration exposure facility. That's Columbia, and that's Columbia's ninth flight to orbit, launched on January 9th, 1990, and with 5 astronauts on board there. So what a beautiful shot, Tom Usiak. Thank you for sharing that. And Marty, is that it? Does America have any reusable spacecraft anymore?
Boosters.
Boosters?
Yeah.
No, my friend, we do. And there it is, a top secret space plane by the Air Force. All right. Now, you can't get 7 people in there. You might be able to get 1, but this is the X37B after it landed during the day, and the last one landed at night after staying over 700 days orbiting the Earth. This one stayed up for over 2 years itself, all right, almost 2 years. And there's the people in scape suits. I guess that would be classified as sort of a scape suit, Marty, or for the toxic fumes and stuff coming out of there. And it's all folded up. It's got 2 wings on it. It's got wheels. It landed on Earth on a runway. Hey, just like they were thinking about in the 1940s of doing, okay? And this is a top secret. We don't know what it's doing, except it's doing stuff to protect our country. And there is the concept of it in space. It does have a solar panel. How do we know that? Because there's a lot of people around the world that photograph satellites through their private telescopes, and they've seen this unfolded out there, and they know that it has some of it is powered by a solar panel out there. Why didn't we do that on the space shuttle? Whip out a solar panel for energy instead of those APUs creating energy. Well, I'm sure they thought of it and a trade-off, and but they didn't have a redundancy. Maybe Marty would be part of it. But there is America's only reusable space plane, the X37B. They have not launched one since the last one landed. We know that the Air Force has 2 of them. They have flown each one of them 3 times, I believe, going from 1 year to over 2 years for each one of them, orbiting with some very serious assets aboard them on spy versus spy to keep our country safe. So, Connie and Marty, thank you for a smooth Streamlabs presentation today. We hope that everyone out there has enjoyed another episode of Stay Curious, where we looked at the history of our space shuttle and how it evolved into what it was. And you bet we love champion the space shuttle, and we're going to continue to do so on Stay Curious, as well as all of those 300 astronauts of the space shuttle era that are in our communities doing great things today, like Mr. Mike Foreman, who we saw at the Visitors Complex this week, the mayor of Friendswood, Texas, Mike Foreman. We'll be celebrating his birthday in March. Marty, you got a comment?
Yeah, Tom Celentano was saying Crew Dragon is reusable.
Crew Dragon is reusable, Tom Celentano. He's absolutely right about that. I asked the question, America, our government, have a reusable spaceship. You're right, Tom. It is a private company that has now got the reusable space. And thank you for reminding me of that. I think the Starliner is going to be somewhat reusable. And we've got Sierra Nevada. Their space plane is called the space plane for Nevada, Sierra Nevada is called Dream Chaser. All right. And that will look like some of these concepts that we helped share with you today. So we're glad that you're with us at the American Space Museum. Our leader, Karen Conklin, has got a lot of things, good things planned for us in 2023, not only with our celebration of space history in our museum and on Stay Curious, but also our fabulous STEAM education programs. That's one of the foundations of our museum here. So we look forward to everybody following us again this year on Stay Curious. If you've got an idea for a program, just put it in your messages here or contact me at marq@americanspacemuseum.org. Well, until we do it again tomorrow, I'm Mark Marquette saying thank you for watching today, and I cannot wait to see you in our museum soon to bridge the space between us.